Hello, my friends. Glad you're here. Like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel.
I've been chasing abandoned places for years. Some people call it reckless. I call it exploration. There's something about these buildings left to rot and decay that feels alive. Most of the time, it's just walls and dust. Sometimes it's not. I first heard about the Blackwood Asylum from an old article buried in the archives of a local library in upstate New York. Closed in 1969, it had been the site of mysterious disappearances, strange experiments, and unexplained deaths. No one in the nearby town went near it, and the road signs pointing to the entrance were faded beyond recognition. The warnings intrigued me. I arrived on a cold November morning. The forest surrounding the asylum swallowed the last light of day, fog curling around the skeletal trees. The building itself was worse than I imagined. Brick walls blackened by years of smoke and rain, shattered windows like empty eyes, and the main gate twisted in on itself. Even from the road, the asylum seemed to exhale a slow, deliberate breath that made the hair on my neck rise. The doors were ajar, warped by years of neglect. I slipped inside, flashlight in hand. The air was thick with rot and mildew. Dust hung like fog, disturbed only by my footsteps. The lobby was massive but empty, furniture broken and decayed. Posters warning of diseases long forgotten clinging to the walls. Shadows pooled in the corners, and I had the strange sensation that they were moving just beyond my vision. I moved through the main floor, documenting everything. Wheelchairs rusted in corners, beds stripped of sheets, patient files spilling from overturned cabinets. One journal caught my eye. The handwriting was spidery, almost frantic. Sketches of faceless figures filled page after page, limbs stretching impossibly, mouths open in silent screams. A single line repeated in the margins. They follow the sound of footsteps. They always follow. I shivered and told myself it was just imagination. The stairwell leading to the basement loomed ahead. This was where the stories said the worst had happened. I hesitated, then descended. The air grew colder with each step, damp and thick, almost tangible. At the bottom, the basement stretched wider than I expected, a labyrinth of machinery, storage rooms, and hallways that seemed to twist in impossible directions. Then I heard it, a scraping sound. At first, I thought it was rats or falling debris. But it came again, deliberate, slow, moving toward me. I froze, flashlight shaking in my hand. Shadows stretched along the walls, darker than they should have been. I stepped forward and froze again. Figures emerged from the corners of the basement, tall, thin, faceless. They didn't move like people. They glided, silent, deliberate. I wanted to run, but the hallways seemed to twist and fold, turning me in circles. Every corridor I tried led me back to the same room, a small storage space filled with photographs scattered on the floor. I better pick one up. My heart stopped. It was me, standing outside the asylum, taken that very day. Only my face was wrong, blank, hollowed, expressionless. I dropped the photo, and a whisper filled the room. Stay, become one of us. I bolted. Hallways stretched endlessly, doors opening to the same spaces I'd already passed. My flashlight flickered and died. I stumbled in the darkness, tripping over debris, hands scraping against concrete and metal. And then I felt them. Touch. Cold, insistent, grabbing at my arms, my legs, my chest. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed. My body felt heavy, as if it no longer belonged to me. My vision blurred, shapes moving in impossible ways, stretching across walls, floor, ceiling. I realized the asylum wasn't just a building. It was alive, and it had claimed me. Then something unexpected happened. I woke up on the forest road outside the asylum, the fog curling around me, heart pounding, body aching. I was free, or so I thought. The next day, I noticed the first changes. Mirrors reflected shapes moving behind me, shadows that weren't mine. Objects shifted when I wasn't looking. I could hear whispers when the house was quiet. And then I saw the photographs. They appeared scattered on my bed, my desk, in my wallet, images of me from angles I didn't remember being photographed, always with dark figures looming behind me. I tried to leave, to escape the city, the state, even the country. But every time I stopped to rest, I glimpsed the asylum, impossibly close, its windows glowing faintly, as if it had grown arms to reach out to me. Weeks turned into months. I started documenting it, photographs, notes, journals, anything to appease it. I realized the Blackwood Asylum didn't just want me to witness it. It wanted me to carry it, to keep its memory alive, to feed it through fear and attention. One night, I made a choice. I returned, not to explore, not to escape, but to surrender. I drove back through the fog, parked near the collapse gate, and walked inside with a calm I hadn't felt before. The shadows welcomed me, the whispers stopped. The basement stretched before me, corridors twisting like before. And for the first time, I felt a home. The asylum had always waited for me, and I had become part of it. Now, when people ask about abandoned places, I tell them stories. I show photographs. I guide the curious to locations that are safe to explore. But some nights, when the wind presses against my windows, I can feel the walls of Blackwood extending, alive in the shadows of my apartment. I'm no longer just a man. I am a witness, a vessel, part of a memory that refuses to end. Some abandoned places are never empty. They wait, they watch, and when they find someone willing, they take them willingly, body, mind, and soul. And Blackwood Asylum, it's patient. I grew up near the edge of the Appalachians, in a town so small you could blink and miss it. Summers were spent exploring ridges and hollows, wading through creeks and climbing rocky outcrops. I thought I knew every trail and twist of the mountains, but there are places even locals don't speak of, places older than memory. I found one such place last October, and it changed everything. My name is Sarah. I was 26, exhausted from a year of deadlines and office walls, and desperate to be alone. I rented a tiny cabin far up a mountain ridge in Virginia, planning to spend a week hiking, journaling, and clearing my head. I told myself I needed quiet. I didn't know the mountains had other plans. The first day was ordinary. I followed a well-worn trail along a ridge, stopping to photograph mossy rocks and the occasional deer. By evening, I set up my tent near a small creek, the water moving quietly over stones. The forest smelled of pine and wet earth. Peaceful, safe. The second day, I noticed a faint trail branching off the main path, barely visible under ferns and fallen leaves. Curiosity pushed me forward. The deeper I went, the darker the forest became. The canopy thickened, filtering sunlight into strange, uneven beams. Shadows moved, but not like shadows usually do. They stretched and bent around trees and rocks, slipping along the ground with no source. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. Eventually, I stumbled into a hollow I'd never seen before. The trees here were enormous, their trunks twisted like faces frozen in agony. At the center of the hollow stood a circle of stones, uneven and weathered, covered in moss and scratches. My stomach tightened as I saw the carvings, spirals, jagged lines, shapes that seemed to move when I blinked. I tried to leave, but the trail behind me had vanished. No matter which way I turned, I ended up back at the hollow. Panic settled in. I called out, but the forest swallowed my voice. Then I saw them. Figures at the edge of the clearing, tall and impossibly thin, moving without sound. Their faces were blank, smooth, but I felt them looking into me, into everything I had ever been. A whisper touched my mind. Stay. I stumbled backward, my chest tightening. I tried to run, but the forest bent around me. Paths looped. Roots tripped me. Every direction returned me to the hollow. The figures circled slowly, closer with each pass. I felt my strength draining, as if they were pulling it from me. I remembered stories my grandmother told me of the mountain watchers, spirits that claimed anyone foolish enough to wander too far. She said one could distract them with an offering, a personal token, a piece of yourself, anything that symbolized who you were. Desperate, I tore a page from my journal and wrote everything I could. My name, my birthday, my family, my fears, my memories. I placed it in the center of the stone circle and shouted, "Take this. Just leave me." The figures paused. The forest grew still. For a heartbeat, I thought I had escaped. Then I ran. Branches clawed at my face, roots tore at my boots, but I emerged onto the main trail as the sun set. The trees looked normal again. Birds called. The wind moved. I was free. I returned to my cabin, packed at first light, and drove down the mountain. I told myself it had been hallucination, stress, exhaustion. I avoided the forest for weeks. But 2 months later, I began noticing things. Reflections in mirrors were slightly wrong. Shadows in corners moved independently. I dreamed of the hollow and the figures, the whispers echoing in my mind. Yesterday, I received a package. Inside was a small, smooth stone, black with strange spirals etched into it. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. The whisper returned in my head, clear and insistent. You cannot leave. We are patient. I realized the truth. The hollow didn't just mark me, it followed me. Part of me had stayed behind, tethered to the forest. Every day, every night, I could feel it pressing closer. The mountains were patient, eternal. And tonight, as I write this, I hear a faint sound in the distance, growing louder. Footsteps just outside my window. I know they are coming. Because the Appalachian Mountains never forget. They wait, and they always collect what is theirs. I have been looking forward to this weekend for months. Camping, hiking, leaving the city behind. Just me, my brother Kyle, and our friend Megan. Kyle had discovered an old trail on a topo map that led to a remote clearing in the Blue Ridge Mountains. No one's been there in years, he said. It's perfect, untouched. The drive up was long and winding. The road narrowed as we climbed, flanked by dense trees. Every mile felt more isolated until the outside world seemed to vanish entirely. When we parked and started the last leg on foot, I realized how quiet it had become. Not the normal hush of the forest, but something heavier, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears. We reached the clearing as the sun dipped low. A small pond glimmered at the center, and thick pines surrounded us. stretching so high their tops disappeared into shadow. We pitched our tents and gathered firewood, feeling triumphant. For a while, it felt like a dream. Night fell. The first hours passed in laughter and the smell of burning wood. But then I noticed something. The firelight didn't reach far. Beyond the circle of warmth, shadows moved in ways that didn't make sense. Shapes that were too tall, too still, almost deliberate. My stomach clenched. Around 2 in the morning, I woke to the sound of water. At first, I thought it was the pond. Maybe a fish jumped. But the splashing was too rhythmic, too deliberate, like someone walking through shallow water. I unzipped my tent and peered out. The pond was still, but the footprints told a different story. They were enormous, human-shaped, stretching from the tree-line into the water, disappearing without a ripple. My chest tightened. I shook Kyle awake. Megan stirred groggily. "Probably a deer," Kyle said, but he didn't sound convinced. We tried to ignore it, but the forest had changed. Shadows pooled unnaturally. Trees leaned inward, branches forming shapes that shouldn't exist. The air felt thick, almost alive. When I stepped closer to the pond, I saw them, figures tall and thin, gliding silently between the trees. Their heads tilted at angles that seemed impossible, watching us. I grabbed Kyle and Megan. "We need to leave. Now." But the trail had vanished. Every direction led deeper into the woods. Panic set in. The trees pressed closer. Roots snagged our feet. Branches lashed at our faces. And then the whispers began, low, persistent, almost intelligent. "Come closer." I tried to drag them along, but they froze, staring at the pond. When I looked back, I saw their reflections, and I froze too. It wasn't our faces. Hollow-eyed, stretched, twisted into expressions that weren't ours. Behind a reflection, the forest bent in impossible ways, shadows writhing like living things. The water rippled. Something rose from it, taller than the figures in the trees, its limbs elongated and featureless, a void where a face should be. It glided forward without touching the ground. I realized with a sickening clarity that it wasn't just a creature. It was the pond itself, alive, drawing us in. I screamed, trying to pull Kyle and Megan away, but the pond reached for them. Their bodies flickered like broken images, their screams muffled and hollow. I struggled, but their forms vanished beneath the surface. I ran blindly, stumbling through the twisting forest until I collapsed. When I woke, I was on a trail I recognized. Sunlight streamed through normal trees. My car was parked exactly where I'd left it. The GPS worked. The outside world was ordinary. I drove home, dazed, haunted by the images of their hollow faces and the way the forest had shifted around us. Weeks later, I returned to the area, careful, cautious, desperate for answers. The clearing was gone. The pond was gone. Even the trail I had taken and felt like a memory, not a physical place. I couldn't find any evidence that it had ever existed. But sometimes at night, I dream of the pond. I see Kyle and Megan beneath its surface, waiting silently, hollow-eyed. And sometimes I hear whispers at the edge of my consciousness, patient, waiting. I survive, but I know it's only temporary. I know that one day the pond will appear again, and it will not wait patiently for long. It doesn't forget. It doesn't forgive. And I know, with certainty, that when it finds me, I will not escape. Because some places in the forest are alive, and some horrors are patient enough to wait decades for their next visitors. I should have stayed home. I really should have. But I convinced myself it was just another camping trip, a weekend in the Appalachians to escape the city, clear my head, and feel alive. My friend Danny and I hiked in mid-afternoon, carrying everything we'd need for 2 nights. The forest was thick, alive with the scent of pine and damp earth, the kind of smell that makes your chest tighten in a good way. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. Not peaceful quiet, but wrong quiet. No birds, no insects, nothing except the wind brushing through the trees. We found a small clearing near a creek and set up camp. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the rocks, making them look like dark pools of liquid. We joked about the shadows at first. It's just the angle of the sun, Danny said, but I wasn't convinced. Night fell quickly. We built a fire, roasted hot dogs, and stared into the flames, telling stories. Around midnight, I woke to something brushing against the tent. At first, I thought it was an animal, but then I heard my name. Not a whisper, not a shout, my exact name, soft and deliberate, coming from the tree lean. Danny, I hissed. He rolled over. What? Did you hear that? He shook his head. Probably just the wind. I didn't believe him. By morning, the forest had changed. The creek curved differently. Rocks were in places they hadn't been before, and the trail back seemed gone. We tried to hike out, but every turn, every ridge led us deeper into unfamiliar territory. Landmarks we had passed earlier had vanished, replaced by twisted trees and strange, moss-covered rocks. My compass spun, useless, and my phone refused to pick up a signal. That evening, we stumbled upon a clearing I hadn't seen on any map. In the center was a stone circle, black and slick, arranged like an altar. A low hum seemed to vibrate from it, deep in my chest. Shadows pooled around the edges of the clearing, stretching toward us, bending unnaturally. Danny stepped forward, curiosity stronger than fear. "What is this?" he asked. "Don't," I warned. He ignored me. The moment his fingers brushed one of the stones, the forest seemed to inhale. Shadows surged forward, thick and liquid, pressing against the edges of the clearing. Whispers filled my head, chanting, "Come, see, join." I tried to grab Danny, but he froze, eyes wide, unblinking. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. The forest twisted around us. Trees bent like they were alive. Shadows pressed against the air itself. And I realized we were not in the world we had entered. The next moments were a blur. I ran blindly through the trees, branches tearing at my clothes, roots tripping me, until I stumbled into the creek near our campsite. The stone circle was gone, Danny was gone, and everything appeared normal. Too normal. I searched for hours, calling his name, but it was as if he had never existed. I returned home alone, shaken, but convinced I could put it behind me. Weeks passed. I tried to return to normal life, but shadows moved differently in my apartment. Reflections showed figures at the edge of my vision. At night, I dreamed of the stone circle, the black stones pulsing under my fingertips. Then the stone appeared. Not in my tent, not in my pocket. It appeared on my bedside table one morning. Smooth, black, warm, pulsing faintly. And the whispers returned, soft, patient, insistent. "Come. See. Join." I tried to ignore it, to throw it away, but the pull was irresistible. Every night, I feel the tug stronger, guiding me, whispering secrets I can almost understand. And I realized the truth. The forest didn't just claim Danny because it wanted him. It wanted me next. The Appalachian Mountains are beautiful, majestic, inviting, but they are patient, and patient things are dangerous, waiting for the right moment to claim what is theirs. Tonight, as I sit here writing this, I can feel the pull stronger than ever. I know I will return, not as a victim, not screaming, not running. I will walk into those mountains willingly, carrying the stone, joining the forest, and becoming something that waits. Patient, eternal. And maybe, when the next fool ventures into those woods, I'll be there already, waiting, whispering, bending the shadows to lead them in. The forest isn't done with me, and it never will be. I moved into my first real house 2 weeks ago. Small, old, single story on a quiet suburban street. I wanted peace, a place to breathe after years in cramped apartments. The street was almost too quiet. Even at night, I could hear the wind stirring the maple leaves, the occasional distant car, and nothing else. The first night, I was unpacking boxes when I noticed movement outside the living room window. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but then I saw it clearly, a figure standing at the edge of the street. Tall, thin, completely still. I blinked and it didn't move. Not a step, not a twitch, not a blink. Just there, watching. I tried to convince myself it was a neighbor or someone lost. I closed the blinds, locked the doors, and tried to focus on unpacking. But every time I glanced at the window, the figure was closer, or maybe I had just imagined the distance shrinking. By the third night, it had moved to the edge of my driveway. I stayed inside, lights on, every door locked, clutching a baseball bat I had found in the garage. My dog had died a year ago, so I had no one to keep watch but myself. I thought about calling someone, anyone, but every time I picked up the phone, it wouldn't work. No signal. I went outside to check the street once, thinking maybe it would vanish in daylight, but the street was empty, the figure gone, or maybe it had never been there, really. Then the scratching started. Thin, deliberate lines along the front door. I had never noticed them before. They weren't deep, but I could feel the pattern as I traced them with my fingers. Someone, or something, was trying to make contact. But why me? I tried to sleep, but each floorboard creak, each shadow moving across the room, made my heart race. I began seeing it in the reflections of windows, in the darkness of other rooms, even when I thought I wasn't looking. Featureless, pale, patient, always waiting. One night, I saw it move differently. It raised an arm, and in its hand was a small object, a leather-bound notebook, worn with pages that seemed almost alive. It had appeared on the porch. I didn't know how. I wanted to throw it away, burn it, run into the night, but something made me reach for it. The moment I touched the leather, my mind opened to places I had never been. Houses I had never seen, streets I had never walked, lives I had never lived. Fear, confusion, despair. I realized it had been recording me, studying me, waiting for the right moment. And now I was part of it. I dropped the notebook. The figure dissolved into the shadows, but I could feel it inside me. Patient, observing, learning, waiting. I tried to leave the house the next day. The car wouldn't start. The roads twisted back to the street. The phone died again. I understood. Escape was impossible. The figure wasn't just outside. It was part of the world now. Weeks passed. Shadows in corners, silhouettes in windows, glimpses in passing cars. Always watching, always patient. And I realized the truth. It hadn't been outside to frighten me. It had been preparing me. One night, I stepped onto the porch deliberately. I didn't run. I didn't shout. I stood still, waiting. Across the street, I saw someone else notice me. a neighbor who had never paid attention before. Their eyes widened. Fear, recognition, understanding. The figure had chosen him next. And I understood completely. This wasn't about surviving. This wasn't about escaping. This was a cycle. Someone notices, someone invites it in, and then the waiting, the observing begins again. I'm no longer afraid. I have become part of it. I stand at the edge of the yard, featureless, patient, waiting. And someday, someone new will look out their window and see me. And when they do, they will understand. The horror is not outside. The horror is in the noticing. And now I wait.
Thanks for being here. See you in the next nightmare.